Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and of all my systems, there are only a couple in which I try to keep to a specific interval of time in between the feedings, and it's actually, they're all right next to each other. The ones in the middle here, the 3 buckets are fed every 14 days, so every 2 weeks, and then the tub that's right next to them, we decided into a 10-day feeding interval. There was one break in that when I was just unable to keep to that schedule, but for the most part, we've been keeping to 10-day feeding intervals. And it's, I think because of that set feeding interval that, I don't know, to me it just seems kind of weird. If you go back one video of mine, it's my outdoor worm bin, and then if you go only 2 videos back, it's kind of a joint feeding in which that bin actually got fed already just 2 videos ago, but now we're back to checking on that system because of its 10-day feeding interval pattern that we've been trying to keep to. So we're going to get that thing up onto the bench and take a look at how it's coming along, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we got into the feeding interval, what's been going on in there, so let's get to work. Well, now the first thing that strikes me about this system once I get it out here on the bench and take a closer look in the light is the presence of lots of castings all around the rim of the container, something I normally don't have since my systems are uncovered. People that have lids create sort of a little humidity pocket down within the container underneath its lid, and then that causes moisture to collect on the walls and causes worms to want to climb. But here, with totally dry walls, to have evidence of worms climbing up the walls is typically a sign that something might be going on that the worms are not too happy with. And something else that I observed was a bunch of dead worms down on the floor. So it does appear to me like this wasn't just curiosity being fulfilled and worms returning to where they came from, but these are really signs of worms that have exited and regrettably probably ended up in a place where they just couldn't get the moisture they needed to survive, and that was the end of them. And that's what I'm seeing on the floor nearby. Luckily not too much of it, but obviously signs of something going on. So really quick, this is the system where we were alternating the corners in which we were feeding each time, and you know, this was printed out quite some time ago with the 10-day feeding intervals breaking only at one point over here somewhere about a month or month and a half ago. We did really good keeping to the 10-day feeding pattern, and once again we're back to another 10-day interval at the bin's 215th day age. This will be feeding number 22, and like the past 5 feedings it got, this will be the 6th time we're adding worm chow only. And something I tried to do in previous check-ins was to collect a lot of this stuff that the worms seem to kick to the surface. Right below it you always find a really nice collection of fresh castings. I thought it'd be really cool to try to focus the worm activity onto this stuff here that I'm collecting with the worm chow when we add it, kind of combining the stuff. I just always seem to forget and get distracted. So I thought that maybe we'd do best if I were to actually pull this stuff out and then treat it as part of the food that they're getting here. It's really more bedding, I would say, less food. So yeah, let's extract this stuff and see what we're left with rather than letting it all blend in. This container will do just fine, I believe. Something I've really wanted to do in this system, actually I've been wanting to do, it doesn't matter what system, any system, something I've been wanting to do, something that I never tried before, which was to sort of do a pre-screening of the stuff that seems to be like at that 95% completely broken down stage already. I mean, you go through it, it's all castings. Here and there you find a piece of more recently added bedding that's not, you know, anywhere near being broken down. Even the things that I usually use as a measure for bin progress, like these little leaf stems, are pretty much all gone. Obviously there's still pieces of the bigger, thicker ones in here. Man, cocoons all over the place too. They're kind of hard to see, especially the ones that have been around for a while. Really dark in color, blend really nicely in. So what I've been really wanting to do is to sort of push the entire contents of the bin aside and then use my screen to kind of pull out everything that's big enough to get caught in the screen. It would probably catch stuff like this, although it would probably, some of it would pass right through. It would catch things like this, I believe, would get caught in the screen. Collect all that stuff up, just like we collected all the stuff on the surface, and then all the stuff that did fall through the screen, the really fine material, would still have worms and cocoons and everything in it, but we'd also be catching a lot of the larger sized worms with the debris that we're trying to separate from the finished castings. Then I thought all the collected worms and the debris could kind of become a migration feeding zone, and then all the fine castings is really the only stuff remaining to be depopulated, and then starting a migration that way. But I think the prerequisite for that sort of a thing would be for the material to all be siftable, and that's what I did not find last time we checked in here. Last time we still found kind of muddy, clumpy chunks, which didn't break apart quite as easily as you're seeing here. I guess here's an example of one. And it's pretty small, luckily, and it is breaking apart more readily than the one I found last time. And this one is chock full of little bits of leftover bedding, which technically we shouldn't just drop it back in, right? We're trying to create a little collection of this stuff. It does seem like those little moisture balls are usually not a bunch of overly wet castings trying to stick together. It's usually other stuff. And once there's nothing sticking together, then you can probably assume that you don't have a lot of debris in there. But for me, it seems like clumpy, sticky balls are usually little hiding spots for stuff that still needs breakdown. And stuff like this banana stem can come out too, I guess. Why not, right? So if I put down today's feeding of worm chow, the dry food, onto all this stuff here, I think it'll give it all a nice bit of attention and traffic. And what I'm really liking also is how most of the muddy clumps that I saw last time appear to have dried enough that they're falling apart on their own, quite effortlessly. Really nice. And maybe we are very close to that point where we might be able to do that sort of, screening of the stuff to build the migration area. But today I was really just intending to come in here, give the system its 22nd feeding now at day 215. And I guess the only thing that concerns me is the worms fleeing. And I think if I see more signs of that happening, then it might be time to provide them with a retreat in the bin, a migration area that they can flee to, rather than feeling like they've got to just exit the bin. Because I'm sure these poor wormies that left probably did scout around for a better place to be and found themselves unable to locate such a spot. It kind of stinks to think that leaving the bin was more desirable than staying. I feel like I've kind of neglected them in their needs. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, set the migration up now. Don't prolong their agony. If there's really something going awry in here, it makes sense to give them a haven to retreat to. And I think I've talked myself into it. I think it is time to get this thing started. But I'm not going to do the screening trick. I am going to pull out, obviously, as you've seen me doing here for the past couple minutes, is pull out anything I can that's bigger, break up anything that's bigger, and this is, I don't even know what that is, whatever, keep it with the foods. But I believe the time has come to initiate the migration of the worms out of this stuff. I had really intended to just let it keep going a little bit longer, because I've been trying to extend the basic lifespan of all my systems, trying to see if I can up the time that they remain in service as a place to do away with kitchen scraps and household waste that the worms can break down. But I think once you see signs that the worms are discontent with their environment, it is time to provide them with a better place to be, rather than leaving them with only one option, which is to flee the system and exit the bin. That's not a good thing. So I'm sure all of you will agree that this is the right next step. So I'm finding stuff like this is probably what used to be a banana stem. I'm finding bits and pieces of some of those things that take more time to break down. These would have been the shells of some avocados that went in here. We tried to help the avocado shells break down a little bit by crushing them here and there when we located them. We didn't put a whole lot of effort into it. There is going to be one crowning object in here that we're going to fish out too, which is the pumpkin stem. Good sized pumpkin stem, which was actually part of this corner here when we were pocket feeding, according to the diagram you saw earlier. So the diagram, I guess that paper that the diagram used to be on can continue to cover things here, because I don't know if we really need to allow things to dry too much more. It does feel like everything's crumbling nicely, although I have gone to, you know, fully uncovered bins in a lot of cases to try to promote more rapid drying, and maybe it wouldn't hurt to put that piece of paper to better use at this point to help us build up the migration area, and to help us also, you know, since it's dry for the most part, possibly also suck in a little bit more moisture. So, you know, instead of using dry food, here it is, pumpkin stem. Pretty awesome. They've done a nice job on it over the, I don't know how many days they've been working on it, but it's going to go into the feeding area as part of what's going to try to lure them out of their finished castings. I still like the idea of doing that screening of the material. I'm so tempted to. Now that I've broken everything up, it does feel like it could all pass through quite quickly and easily. And we will at the same time collect a whole bunch of worms that we can use to sort of pre-populate the horizontal migration feeding zone. Instead of needing to wait for them to get over there, they'll be there already. So tempting. Something I've wanted to do so badly anyway. You know, screen is right here behind me. All I gotta do is grab it. Maybe think about the logistics of the space I need to make it work. Seems pretty doable though. I've almost set up a space into which we could put the collected material, or maybe just let the collected material start dropping onto one side. I don't know. I'm gonna think this through. I'm gonna go grab the screen. I think we're gonna give it a go. How does that sound? Sounds like fun to me. All right. Okay, enter my screen. It's just the top of a cutoff bucket with some of this hardware cloth stuck to it. A piece of twine strung around, holding it in place. Nothing special. Amazingly, it's lasted me years and it worked great. So I really did not plan on making this into a big project. All I'm after is all these things like these avocado seeds, or not seeds, well, if we hit an avocado seed, yes, but basically we're just trying to get all the large things like those avocado shell pieces, fragments. And I do envision a good amount of this stuff passing through the screen, but unfortunately, since I'm a little bit limited on space here, see, I can't really use the whole surface of the screen. Oh, making a mess here. Okay, you know, this is usually not the way I use my screen. I usually have it resting on top of the bucket that everything that passes through gets caught in, and it kind of makes me wonder if that's the better mechanism to be using here. And I'm even starting to question, yeah, okay. I was wondering if the material was too damp or clumpy to pass through, but it's not the material that's damp and clumpy, it's the worms that are damp and clumpy. And since I'm doing this with material that's loaded with worms, I probably should anticipate that it's going to get caught up pretty quickly rather than having the majority of it pass through. I usually screen stuff that's worm free. I usually don't subject the worms to this sort of agony. But I am starting to feel like I'm going to have to empty the screen regularly into something else. And it does seem like maybe collecting this stuff down into the bucket that it normally collects down into, rather than trying to do it this way over the bin, is the better way too. So, live and learn, right? So it's my first time trying to do this, but I'm still really excited to see what kind of result we can get. So let me start with a fairly decent sized container, because I don't know how much it's going to amount to in the end, but between collected materials plus worms plus whatever castings are stuck to those two items, I could see us getting to the top of this container pretty quickly. and then in comes the bottom half of my screening mechanism. So I'm a little bit out of space here on this crowded view. Typically I'll just match the screen section to its bucket below, and that really gives me a contained space with these nice sidewalls to do the shaking of the material in. I'm totally breaking form here. Not setting things up in the way I normally do, so maybe I should take a quick break and see if I could set this up to be a little bit more optimal so we can get through this more quickly. So break time. Okay, so not a lot to it. All I really did was prop up a brick behind the red bucket so it doesn't go sliding away, so that we can pile stuff into it, and then I could pick up the whole sifting mechanism and give it a good shake, and then we'll be left with worms and leftover food bits and bedding bits. And I think this stuff is really crumbling so nicely. Very cool. I like it. So here you can see the results of one of these screening sessions. Good number of worms coming together along with all this debris, leftover bits of bedding and stuff. So I'm going to just go through this really quickly. Try not to prolong the process. Seems like it's a little bit intrusive on the worms to run them through this fairly traumatic process. That's why I'd like to try to just do it as quickly as possible and get it over with. I just have to comment on how every load like this results in a huge number of worms. I'm amazed. I'm also amazed at how nicely the castings are flowing. So I'm really looking forward to getting this thing set up the way I envisioned. Stuff seems to pass through pretty nicely. Fun stuff. Alright, well, that one was a little bit more than usual. It took a little bit longer to sift through, but it's also going to result in a great number of more worms than typical. It's just incredible how many worms are in this system. So many more than I thought. Really, seriously, so many more than I thought. Look at them all. Alright, onward. We're getting there. We're getting there, boys. We'll be done soon. Oh man, look at them all. They're everywhere. It's awesome. Alrighty. It's incredible. Every one of these screening batches results in so many worms. I'm so excited to see how many worms. I'm not even working so hard to screen out a whole bunch of castings. I'm just giving it a little jiggle. I want to see all the worms. Every batch. Look at it all. Almost out of space. Hopefully I've got enough room in this little container to finish doing this process through the whole remainder of the container. And even the screen is starting to get a little bit mucked up with some of the more damp materials. I'm sure this would work a lot nicer if the screen was completely free of any junk. But we're almost there. I'm not going to worry too much about trying to tweak the tools here. It is my first time trying this, so a little bit unexpected with the moisture catching in the screen and me running out of space here within the screen so quickly because so much stuff being caught up in it. So much stuff being the worms themselves, to be specific. Let's shake this a little bit more. Yeah, you know, I think the next thing is going to have to be to try to clear the screen. Perhaps if I were to do that more regularly, then the whole thing would go more quickly. I think it's just a matter of turning it over and letting some of the stuff that's stuck on this side of it drop back out. Let's give that a try. Oh boy, a lot of stuff caught up in this thing. Luckily it all flakes so nice and readily. Doesn't really want to stick, but where there's pockets of moisture remaining, it does. But luckily it's pretty manageable. Like I said, we're almost done. And man, oh man, look at that material we're screening out. looks awesome. I just feel bad for the wormies. They're probably not appreciating this roller coaster ride, so let's get this thing done. As I'm swiping up handfuls of material from really low down, I just kind of started breaking in through the side over here. There's so many worms in this stuff, it's incredible. And naturally, as we shake the castings away, we'll reveal them all. But we're almost there. Fun stuff. Alright, here we go. Once again, look at them all. So many worms. Incredible. We're definitely running out of room inside this plastic container for them. Unbelievable. And to think how many are falling through, the little babies and all the cocoons that have yet to yield worms down within the finished castings within the red bucket. Whoa. Just want to make sure this thing doesn't go tipping over. That'll be no fun. I think that the worm bin itself is becoming too light now. Maybe I need another brick to stack behind the bin so it doesn't go sliding, but I'll just be careful. We're almost there. Awesome. Well, I'm finding that the red bucket is getting very heavy, and makes sense because castings, they hold a good bit of moisture and they've got a good bit of weight to them because of that. I guess when they're dry they're not as heavy, but when they're damp, and this stuff is a little bit damp, as you've seen already. My goodness, look at all these worms. So I'm wondering if I'm going to have to clear out what's in the red bucket just to let us finish here. I don't know. We're getting very close though. Very close. Oh boy, wow. We are getting close. And I think there's just enough room in the red bucket for us to be able to finish this, I think. It's only when I tip it over on its side that the stuff kind of flows over and feels like it's right up against the screen over here, but when it's level it seems like there's a good few inches of space remaining underneath the screen for us to allow for just a little bit more stuff to be screened out right here. So we're almost done. Okay, last little bit here, maybe 2 more screens worth. But look at that. How can there be so many worms in this system? It's insane. Incredible. Once again, it just seems like each of these, every single one of these screenings results in pretty much enough worms to launch off a new bin. Feels like I could launch off 5, 6, 8 worm bins with this many European night crawlers. Insane. Look at them all. I can't believe it. Alright, well, I guess I'll pause the camera. I'm going to just maybe pour what's left in this over into the screen. And then we can proceed. But we are almost at that point where we're going to be able to set up the migration zone for these little guys and let them get back to work. Well, it's not so much getting back to work anymore. It's more about moving over into the collection area. So besides building it out with all the stuff that we captured with the worms, all that leftover bedding and food, I'm going to have to drum up some nice fresh bedding to include. We'll make it nice and damp in there for them so they'll be attracted to it. So this should be kind of cool to watch once it gets underway. Alright, time for a pause so I can pour this out and we'll regroup momentarily. Fast forward about an hour and a half. Gave me time to think. And rather than cleaning this bin out and continuing it beyond day 215, today at day 215, this ENC bin that we used to do the pocket feedings in is now done. And I've even gone so far as to reset the bin. It's all cleaned out and ready to go for another purpose, as is a second bin that I prepare to set up. I've got my box of leaves here. I've got shredded paper cardboard, my water supply, and a number of other things with which we're going to create a nice new environment, 2 new environments to move our worms into, and then even a third space that we're going to put the castings into, allow the cocoons in there sometime, create a nursery out of it. So in the end, this is what we're going to be left with. We're going to be left with a cocoon nursery and 2 nightcrawler bins, European nightcrawler bins. Seems like the way to go considering the number of worms we saw and considering the likelihood of a bunch of cocoons in that material. Makes sense to let it sit for a while. So I'm going to set these bins up for that purpose, and then it's just going to be a matter of releasing the worms and dumping the castings into another third tray and affixing the labels to replace the retired one. Alright, let's get to work. Or better yet, I'm going to do that stuff offline. We'll get back online here with the camera once it's time to set up the nursery and to release the worms into their new homes. How does that sound? Alright, onward. We'll start with the easy one. It's just a matter of emptying the red bucket with all the fine castings and the cocoons and whatever worms slip through into this tub right here. So let's see if we could do so without making a huge mess. Stuff did seem to flow pretty nicely. I could see worms in this stuff, and I expected that. Mostly little ones that I knew would slip right through the screen. Oh, jeez. Never a dull moment when I'm trying to transfer material from one container to another. Luckily, it looks like the damage was minimal. I think I'm gonna have to get my dust broom out and tidy up, and we'll be right back. Okay, now that we've got all the material in the container that it belongs in, we can get back to work. And I was about to mention earlier, there's cocoons in here of all different types. There was a couple really light colored ones that I see right here, a couple dark ones right next to it. The really light ones are the ones that are going to need more time. The dark ones could be ready to hatch any time at all. So hopefully we're going to end up with a nice tray with a whole bunch more worms in it in a little while. And by a little while I mean weeks. You know, you want to give the cocoons time to hatch, and the babies to sort of grow to a decent size where they start to explore the bin and start moving around. And by that time I would think that they're going to nip off pretty much all the available nutrition and the material remaining in this system, and then hopefully luring the inhabitants of the system out of here will be pretty easy in a fairly short period of time. And I think by also allowing the material to dry a little bit over that time, it'll also help motivate the worms to want to move out of this stuff. So talk about some really beautiful castings. Now I had this stuff here that was really meant to, you know, become the migration zone foundation for luring worms out of this stuff, but you know, I'm not sure we're ready for that. I'm not even sure how we're going to go about trying to lure worms out of this thing. It does seem like a migration would make a lot of sense at some point, who knows when. But you know what, I think I'm going to use this piece of plastic container here just to keep all this stuff that sort of belongs with these worms together. I did imagine this stuff as being possibly the, you know, most ideal stuff to lure the worms out of the finished castings. It's totally familiar material for them. I thought that maybe just add a little bit of kitchen scraps, some moisture to it, and they'll come running. That's what my, you know, hopes were for the stuff that we collected up off the top surface there. And that's really all that was. Remember, we put that in here. And all the other stuff that got caught in the screen is with the worms. That's just going to go into the new bins when they get released into their new homes. So this stuff I think will just sit. Maybe I'll cover it up loosely to allow for some drying even. And then at some point soon, hopefully we can begin thinking about trying to get the worms out of this thing. So let's get this aside, get my two newly built bins out here so we can release our collected European night crawlers and launch off two new systems. Wow, awesome. Alright, so what you see here are the two new bins that I just built from scratch. Usually I like to use materials that I've had aging for a little while, sometimes even pre-built bins that have been aging for a while, but in this case everything was just shredded now, and these bins are pretty much going into service sterile, if you will. So not what I would consider the ideal situation, but I don't think it's going to be a big problem. These worms are going to be quite capable of making themselves at home in here. So here we come with this huge container. I mean, it's not that huge, but it's heavy, and it's got a lot of stuff in it, a lot of worms. I was just trying to think, how do I how do I release these worms in such a way that we have a good fair split? I almost thought I would just dump them all into one, and then before they dive, I could scoop a equal amount of them over into the other bin. So let me give that a try. So here we go, releasing the worms that we collected out of our previously pocket-fed 215-day-old European nightcrawler system to launch off 2 brand new European nightcrawler systems. And there's no food in these containers. They're just being, ooh, look at all those worms. There's really no food in here at all. I'm just putting bedding for now. I'll come back to these systems in a short while after they've had a chance to settle in and get them fed. But now I just want to take care to try to equally split the worms that we've got in here. As usual, I'm definitely looking for people's input on how many worms we've got here, and at this point I'm not going to be trying to get an estimate for each bin individually. I'm going to ask for a simple estimate of how many worms the systems have, and I'm just going to use that same number for both. So hopefully I'm doing a good job at splitting up the population evenly here. I don't think I've got quite enough of them over there. I'm just trying to equate each handful to a certain amount of weight, maybe half a pound of worms in each handful. Maybe I've moved over about 1.5 pounds, possibly leaving behind another 1.5 pounds. Could that be 3 pounds of worms I had? I don't want to overestimate the weight either, because, you know, a lot of the weight is probably castings too. But I think we'll just grab maybe another little handful of worms to move over. Oops, sorry buddy. And let's get them situated in their new home, and we'll be done here. Woohoo! I left a little time there for myself to rescue worms from the red bucket, as well as this container here. And it does appear that after maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I believe, the worms have for the most part gone down into the material. I don't know, this seems almost unnecessary, but it does feel like I'd like to spread the material out a little bit, sort of make sure that all the uninoculated, sort of, I don't know, sterile material, I guess, on the bottom all has pretty good direct access to the nice worked material that came over with the worms, and then hopefully they'll be able to, you know, get acclimated to the new fresh material down low soon. Maybe if they start sensing how much moisture I dumped into these containers, I think a lot of the liquid is drained to the bottom, and maybe they'll go down for that. I'm almost starting to wonder if I moved too many worms over. Seemed like maybe there were more in the other container. Maybe not. Maybe I just didn't dig down deep enough. Alright, I'm not going to try to balance the worm count. We're just going to leave them be. Let them settle, and we'll just put some loose coverings on these systems, get the labels on, and we'll be finished. What is this? Some sort of little piece of plastic. Almost looks like it might have gone through. No, it wouldn't have been shredded. If it did, it would have been smaller, but I guess I got lucky and found something that doesn't belong. I was able to pull it out. But I think we're pretty much done here. Well, once again, I've gotten myself into a situation that I didn't really anticipate, but, you know, once you come to certain realizations that maybe the worms are not content in their home, sometimes, to me at least, it feels like the safer bet to just get them out, you know. And with worms climbing the walls, dead worms on the floor, it just seemed like the best bet to get the worms out. I don't know what the problem was, but my only main concern at this point is that the material is, for the most part, now here in the cocoon nursery. If I can get it to come off my finger. So hopefully whatever worms stuck behind and whatever worms are going to be born into this material here are not going to also get that weird sense that they've got to flee the material. So keeping my fingers crossed for that. Maybe it would be a good idea just to start thinking about, even if it seems, I don't know, maybe if it seems even a little bit premature to do so, maybe setting up a migration zone in there just so that if they do feel a need to vacate the stuff, they've got someplace safe to go and don't have to leave the bin. So please join me in welcoming now my 2 newest European nightcrawler bins. Don't forget, I'm looking for some input now, assuming that both of them have the same exact number of worms in it. And I'd also like to hear people's feedback on whether or not I did a good job on splitting the count evenly. I hope I did. But either way, whatever number I get from you guys, it's going to go in as the worm count for both of these bins. So please, in the comments, let me know what you think you saw there. So that's it for today's video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.